My friends, we live in an age when the ordinary has disguised itself as final, when the visible world seems to shout louder than the invisible. Yet, those who have been chosen, those who know that the call of God burns inside them, must awaken to a deeper truth. You have been set apart not for comfort, but for courage, not for silence, but for witness, not for the possible, but for the impossible. When you look around, you will see 1,000 reasons to doubt, to shrink back, to surrender your faith for ease. The culture of distraction, the weight of trials, and the whispers of despair seek to lull you into believing that nothing more can be done. But the chosen know something greater. They know that behind the veil of this world, another kingdom presses in. That heaven is not idle, waiting for some distant future, but moving even now in step with obedience. To you who are chosen, understand this. The impossible is not a wall, it is an invitation. The sea was never meant to stay closed when the people of God stood before it. Stones never imagined they would sink into the forehead of giants. Loaves and fishes never thought themselves sufficient for multitudes. But when placed into the hands of God, the impossible becomes the stage on which His glory performs. The time is urgent. The moment cannot be delayed. Each day that passes without faith lived boldly is a day that cannot be recovered. You stand now at the threshold of decisions that matter not only for yourself, but for generations to come. The world tells you to blend in, to compromise, to let tomorrow take care of itself. Yet the chosen cannot live that way. They have been called to step out, to shine, to do what common strength cannot do. Before the date draws near, before 22 August 2025 arrives, you must understand that heaven does not wait for the hesitant. It moves with the obedient, those who trust, who risk, who act when it is hardest. These are the ones through whom the impossible becomes possible. The chosen must not be asleep when the trumpet sounds, nor distracted when the hand of God moves. They must be awake, vigilant, ready to walk where others fear. So rise, chosen ones, take courage. Do not look at the mountain and say, it cannot move. Speak to it. Do not look at the storm and say, it will drown me. Step upon the waters. Do not look at the darkness and say, it will swallow me. Light shines brightest where shadows are thickest. You are not here to live an ordinary story. You are here to do the impossible. The chosen are called not for comfort, but for courage, not for silence, but for witness, and not for the possible, but for the impossible. The chosen are called not for comfort, but for courage, not for silence, but for witness, and not for the possible, but for the impossible. This truth has always been woven into the story of God's people, though many do not see it clearly at first. The call of the chosen one is not the call to sit idle in safety or to enjoy a life free of burdens, but to stand firm in the face of trials, to shine even when the world prefers darkness, and to walk paths others would call impossible. Comfort is what the flesh longs for, but courage is what heaven asks. Courage to face ridicule, courage to deny oneself, courage to live for a kingdom that cannot be seen by the eyes of the crowd. This courage is not born out of human willpower alone, but from a deep awareness that one has been chosen for something beyond the natural order of life. To be chosen means to carry a responsibility that cannot be ignored, a responsibility to rise when others bow, to speak when others are silent, and to persevere when others surrender. Comfort has always been the enemy of growth. When men and women of faith have chosen ease, they have drifted into forgetfulness, losing the fire that once stirred their souls. But courage is what keeps the chosen awake. Courage refuses to trade the eternal for the temporary, refuses to compromise truth for acceptance, and refuses to shrink back when obedience is costly. The chosen know that their lives are not their own, that they are marked for a greater task. They understand that they are set apart not for applause or recognition, but for the mission of heaven, which often demands sacrifice. The path of the chosen is not paved with comforts, but lined with challenges meant to test and strengthen their faith. And just as they are not called to comfort, they are not called to silence. Silence may seem easier, for to remain quiet when the world rages is to avoid its scorn. But the chosen cannot remain silent, for within them burns a message too urgent to hide. Witness is not optional for those who carry the mark of heaven. They are not called to blend into the noise of the age, but to lift their voices as a clear trumpet sound, declaring truth in a generation drowning in lies. Their witness may not always be welcomed, it may even be resisted, but it cannot be extinguished. The chosen are compelled to speak, not because they seek attention, but because they have been entrusted with words of life. To be silent would be to betray the one who called them. To be silent would be to allow darkness to grow unchecked. Their witness is a light on a hill, meant not for hiding but for shining so that others may see and be led out of despair. Yet even beyond courage and witness, the chosen are not called merely for what is possible in the eyes of man. They are called for the impossible. The possible does not need divine intervention. It does not reveal the glory of God. But the impossible, that which no human hand could achieve, that which no earthly mind could conceive, that is the realm where the chosen are meant to walk. The impossible is the sea parting at the command of faith, the dead rising when hope was buried, the walls of Jericho falling not by strength, but by obedience. The chosen are not asked to do what anyone could do. They are asked to trust for what only heaven can accomplish. The impossible is the proof that God is present, the evidence that faith is alive. And so, the chosen must not fear impossibility, but embrace it as the very stage upon which their purpose is revealed. To live this calling is to live differently. It means that when others settle for comfort, the chosen press into sacrifice. When others remain silent, the chosen lift their voices. When others stop at what is humanly possible, the chosen take the step into the impossible. This life is not easy, but it is glorious, because it is the life heaven has designed for those who belong to it. It is the life of courage, the life of witness, and the life of the impossible. Heaven moves in step with obedience, turning impossible barriers into stages for God's glory. Heaven moves in step with obedience, turning impossible barriers into stages for God's glory. This truth has been written across the history of faith, where every miracle and breakthrough has always followed the moment when someone dared to obey against all odds. Obedience is not simply following a rule or bowing to a command. It is the active surrender of one's will to the will of God, even when it defies reason, convenience, or human calculation. Many desire to see heaven move, many pray for miracles, many cry for breakthroughs, yet they hesitate to step into obedience. Heaven does not pour out its power upon wishful thinking or passive desires, but upon those who walk in alignment with divine instruction. When men and women choose to obey, even when the path seems uncertain, the unseen power of heaven begins to rearrange what looked immovable, making the impossible bend to divine purpose. The Red Sea did not part until Moses stretched out his hand in obedience to the command of God. The walls of Jericho did not fall until the people marched around them exactly as instructed, day after day, in what must have seemed like a foolish act to the watching world. The widow's oil did not multiply until she obeyed the prophet's words to borrow empty jars and pour what little she had. Each of these moments reveals the same truth. Obedience was the key that unlocked heaven's movement. God could have acted without their participation, but he chose to move in partnership with human trust and action. Heaven does not merely watch from afar. It responds to the faith-filled obedience of those willing to risk looking foolish in the eyes of men, so that glory might be revealed in the eyes of eternity. obedience often feels impossible because it demands trust without guarantees. It demands stepping onto waters that do not yet feel solid, moving forward into a darkness where the path is not fully lit, or speaking a word that may be rejected. Yet, it is in these moments that heaven's power is most clearly seen. The chosen discover that the barrier they thought was immovable is not there to crush them, but to reveal the power of the one who goes before them. What seems like a wall is transformed into a stage. What feels like a prison becomes a platform. What appears like an end becomes a beginning. Every barrier the chosen face is an opportunity for heaven to display its glory, but only if they are willing to obey the instruction given in the moment. The world teaches that success comes by calculation, by strength, by influence, by resources. But heaven does not operate by the measures of the world. Heaven moves when obedience is greater than fear, when trust outweighs doubt, when faith takes priority over convenience. It is not the size of the obstacle that matters, but the willingness to follow the voice of God despite the obstacle. A mountain will remain in place until a voice, filled with obedient faith, commands it to move. A door will stay locked until obedient hands knock upon it. A storm will rage until an obedient step is taken onto the waves. Heaven delights to transform impossibility into testimony, but only through those who are willing to obey without hesitation. This truth calls the chosen to live with a posture of readiness. Obedience is not a single act, it is a lifestyle. It is waking each day prepared to say yes to whatever instruction comes, whether it seems great or small. Sometimes obedience is dramatic, like leaving behind a homeland to walk into the unknown, as Abraham did. Other times, it is quiet and unseen, like choosing integrity in a moment when no one is watching. Yet heaven values both, for both open doors to divine movement. The small acts of obedience build the foundation for great moments of breakthrough, and the great moments of obedience inspire generations to trust in the God who is faithful. To understand that heaven moves in step with obedience is to know that nothing in life is wasted when surrendered to God's will. Even hardships, delays, and detours become instruments in His hand when met with a willing heart. The impossible is no longer a cause for despair, but an invitation to trust more deeply, to obey more fully, to see more clearly that heaven is waiting not for circumstances to change, but for obedience to align with its timing. Every act of obedience, no matter how small, creates ripples in eternity, shifting what seemed unmovable and making way for glory to be revealed. The urgency of faith demands that the chosen rise, act, and shine before it is too late. The urgency of faith demands that the chosen rise, act, and shine before it is too late. Faith is never meant to be passive, never meant to be a quiet feeling kept in the corner of the heart, but a living force that moves a believer to action. Urgency is written into the very nature of faith because every moment carries weight, every choice carries consequence, and every opportunity can shape eternity. The chosen are not called to wait until circumstances feel right or until the world applauds their decision. They are called to step out now, in the midst of uncertainty, because delay is the enemy of destiny. Procrastination is one of the most subtle weapons against faith, whispering that tomorrow will be a better day to obey, tomorrow will be a better time to shine, tomorrow will be a safer moment to rise. Yet tomorrow is never promised, and the cost of waiting is often greater than the cost of action. The urgency of faith is clear throughout the lives of those who walked with God. Noah did not wait for the rain to begin before he started building the ark. He acted when there was no sign of a storm, and his obedience preserved life. David did not wait until someone else challenged Goliath. He stepped forward when the army trembled in fear, and his courage turned the tide of a nation. Esther did not remain silent until someone else spoke for her people. She risked her life before the king, knowing that hesitation could mean destruction. In every case, the urgency of faith was the dividing line between victory and loss, life and death, hope and despair. The chosen must recognize that the call on their lives carries the same demand for immediacy, the same pressing need to act before it is too late. Faith without urgency becomes complacency, and complacency is the slow death of calling. The chosen who settle into delay find themselves drifting further from the fire that once burned in them. Opportunities pass, doors close, hearts grow cold, and the spark of obedience dims. Urgency keeps faith alive, alert, and focused. It reminds the chosen that their time is not endless, that their mission is not indefinite, and that the world around them is in desperate need of light now, not later. The souls waiting for truth cannot wait forever. The battles raging in the unseen cannot be postponed. The kingdom's work cannot be delayed. To rise, to act, to shine must happen in the present, for every delay is a victory handed to the forces of darkness. To rise means to awaken from slumber, to recognize that being chosen is not a title, but a responsibility. Rising is the refusal to remain seated in apathy while the world cries out for hope. It is standing firm when opposition seeks to intimidate, lifting one's head when fear tries to press it down, and remembering that the chosen are called to stand as witnesses of a greater kingdom. To act means to translate faith into movement, to make decisions that reflect trust in God, even when the outcome is uncertain. Action is not about waiting for perfect conditions. It is about stepping forward in obedience, knowing that heaven moves with those who move in faith. To shine means to live in such a way that the light of God cannot be hidden, to let truth and love be visible through words, choices, and presence. Shining is not boasting in oneself, but reflecting the glory of the one who called. It is being willing to be seen, to be different, to be a beacon in a dark generation. The urgency of faith also demands boldness, because the pressures of the age tempt the chosen to compromise or remain silent. But delay is not neutral, it is surrender. Every time faith is postponed, darkness takes ground. The chosen cannot afford to linger on the edge of decision, debating endlessly whether the cost is worth it. The cost of inaction is always greater, for it robs not only the individual of their purpose, but also the world of the light they were meant to bring. Faith was never meant to wait until all doubts were gone or all answers were clear. It was meant to act now, trusting that as the chosen rise and move, clarity and strength will come in the moment they are needed. This urgency is not meant to create fear, but to awaken responsibility. It is a reminder that the clock is always ticking, that eternity is always approaching, and that every life has a window in which to fulfill its divine assignment. To waste that window is to waste what heaven intended for this generation. The chosen must carry a sense of holy urgency, not rushing with panic but moving with purpose, knowing that now is the time to rise, now is the time to act, now is the time to shine.